Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Mindset Alchemy podcast. I'm Janine, your host, and I love introducing people to the power of words, the power of your mindset, and basically better ways of restoring a little bit of clarity and sanity to your life. And because of that, I've invited my wonderful guest, the awesome Gail Page, the queen of difficult conversations, to come and share with you how she enjoys helping people. Gail helps and assists leaders in the professional services to address communication and behaviors that actually get in the way of culture and behaviors. She helps people with mental health and performance. With 26 years of experience and a background in social work and mental health, Gail's one-to-one coaching and teamwork fosters trust, a great thing to foster, enables courageous conversations, and transforms firefighting into focused leadership. Gail's work has a lasting impact in organizations where staff, long after she has moved on to her next adventure, still carry on using the tools she's offered them. Gail, I'm delighted to have you join me today. Welcome, welcome, welcome.
I am delighted to be here, Janine. I'm so looking forward to where this conversation's going to go.
Oh, it's so much fun. I met Gail at a networking event, and then we had some awesome conversations after that. And on that point, Gail, would you like to share with our audience what exactly you help people with, your beautiful time in New Zealand, and where you are now?
Well, it's interesting you say about New Zealand because, believe it or not, today is 1 year exactly to the day that we landed in the UK.
Wow. Well,
Um,
happy return anniversary.
Thank you very much. After 18 and a half years in New Zealand.
Oh, hey.
And it's been a wonderful journey on lots and lots of different levels.
Journeys are fun. What took you to New Zealand in the first place?
Well, I could say a bottle of wine.
A what?
A bottle of wine.
Now that's a good one. I haven't heard that before. Tell us the story.
So, my partner and I had been in the same house for almost 5 years, and we had originally said we'd stay there 2 years, do it up and flip it. And one night, over a glass of wine, I just said, right, that's it, I'm done, we're moving. And we had friends who'd been in New Zealand on holiday and said that when their children were older, we were going to move. So don't ask me where this came from, but I said to my partner, do you know something? I really envy them. We could do that, eh? And she looked at me as if I'd gone out. And long story short, 2.5 hours later, we had done our due diligence. We checked out about jobs, about house prices, etc. We paid our money and put our hands on the mouse, and we looked at each other and she said, are you sure? I said, well, if it's meant, it will happen. And if it's not, it won't. And 4.5 months later, we landed in New Zealand.
Beautiful.
We
Which
sold
part did you go to, north or south?
north.
North. Okay, sorry. Sorry for interrupting, but yes. So you
No, no,
landed. I believe, if I remember correctly, you had no work when you arrived there.
no, I didn't. My partner had a job, but I got my first client in a supermarket queue.
Okay, that's a good start. What happened after that?
Well, I think it was about 3 weeks after we landed and was coming up to Christmas. And there was a woman stood in front of me, great long queues. This woman stood there and she's huffing and puffing like this. And she was inviting conversation. So I thought, well, I'll join in. So I said, do you know, it's funny, isn't it? You'd think we'd learn, but every year we do the same old, same old. And she said, oh, you don't understand. My mother-in-law's coming to stay. I can't stand her. So I said, well, I never give advice, but here are a few thoughts that might help. So she went, oh, oh my goodness, I can use that. And she says, what do you do? So I told her, and she said, have you got a card? I said, no, not yet. I've only been here a few weeks, but I've got a phone number. I'll be your first client after Christmas. And
Wow.
you think people say things. Anyway, 10th of January, the phone rang, and there was her saying, right, let's do this. And that was it. She told people who told people, and that's how my business got off the ground in New Zealand.
I think that is so powerful. And people, that's the power of intuition, I have discovered. When we follow that inner whisper and we follow the breadcrumbs that life lands in front of us, it's so powerful. Gail, I love the story you had about your various organizations you worked for. What was the primary common factor you found was the biggest challenge in across the board in all organizations?
Well, you know what it's like. We all have to have difficult conversations in our lives, but we kind of put them off
Mm,
because either we're scared of the person's reaction or we're not sure if they can handle their emotions or our own emotions. Well, the same is true in business. And, I've been in business 26 years and I've worked with people who are just starting off in life, in their career. And I've worked with everybody from there up to the CE and their executive leadership teams. And the one thing that is common amongst everyone is their fear of having a difficult conversation. Every single one. So, of course, we put them off. And what happens is that something that started off as something like a grain of sand, ends up becoming this massive boulder because nobody has addressed what it is that's going on.
mhm.
And I've seen so many behaviors that are so toxic, so toxic. And, I get called in quite often too late. It's a bit like me being the ambulance at the bottom of the cliff.
Oh my
But,
goodness.
I don't want to be an ambulance, whether it's at the top or the bottom of the cliff. I am a great believer in prevention is much, much better than cure.
Absolutely resonate with that, Gail.
In fact, if I had my way, I would be banging on the doors of the education departments and suggesting that they introduce age-appropriate assertiveness into school curriculums. Because if they did that, it would probably only take one generation
Yep.
to get rid of the amount of bullying that we've got, because unfortunately, schoolyard bullies end up becoming corporate bullies.
Mm-hmm.
And I've done a lot of work with people who have been bullied. And I would love it if I could make myself redundant.
Yeah, I hear you. On that point, there are quite a few things I feel should be kicked out of the school curriculum and replaced with things that help children understand emotional intelligence, how to deal with people, and give them a vocabulary of emotional perspective.
Mm-hmm.
What has been your biggest success in the business world when it comes to that emotional and energetic reframing, pivoting, and helping people to understand that well without saying it? Life is energy, let's deal with it perfectly, more perfectly.
Well, one of the most memorable was I cannot stop smiling. I think back on it because this must be about 16 years ago. And I was working with one of the local authorities, and I was running a series of difficult conversations workshops.
Mhm.
And at the beginning of every workshop, I always get people to come up and write on the flip chart one thing that will need to happen for them to make the day worthwhile attending.
Mhm.
And that way, I just get to make sure that I can check in and make sure everybody's needs are being met. So everybody came and they picked up the pen on the table next to me, and there was a red pen, a black pen, and a blue pen. And everybody picked up the black pen until this one guy came and looked me up and down, sort of went, picked up the red pen and walked up to the flip chart and wrote his name in capital letters,
Huh?
then wrote the word nothing in capital letters and double underlined it, came back, slammed the pen down on the table, looked me up and down once again, sat back in his chair, and did the typical power pose. And you could see his colleagues going, oh no. So, I mean, for me, it was playtime then. You know,
Yes.
I love that kind of situation. And so I said to him, I'm sensing that you might not want to be here. And he goes, oh, bravo, well done, dear. And his colleagues, once again, you could see him go, oh my goodness. And I'm quick on the uptake, huh? And he went, oh, yes. So I said, I'm also sensing that you were sent to this workshop, that you didn't ask to come on it. And he went, oh, 10 out of 10. Who's a clever girl? And I'm not joking, it was all I could do not to laugh.
Oh, I would have been hysterical.
So I said to him, I said, well, look, I tell you what, how about you give me 1 hour of your time? And if at the end of that hour you really feel it's not been worthwhile, you can leave with my blessing, and I'll even talk to your manager about it. And he was just about to get up. And I said, and I really eyeballed him and said, that is, unless you're not up for the challenge.
Ooh.
Now, I knew he wouldn't leave if I said that, because
Yes.
he would have lost face.
Hmm.
He said, fair enough. So I kept my eye on the clock and I made sure he was really engaged in exercises, and tapped him on the shoulder halfway through. And I said, you've only got half an hour left. And he said, what? I said, you've only got half an hour left. Yeah, yeah. So 5 minutes to go. I tapped him on the shoulder. I said, look, I said, you've only got 5 minutes left. I said, you might as well leave now. And he said, look, do you mind? I'm busy. So he stayed. And then 2 weeks later, we had a follow-up.
Mhm.
I don't believe in doing training without follow-ups. And so I said, right, I said, just a quick round robin. Everybody share one thing that you've used that worked really well for you and why you think that was, and one thing that didn't work as well as you might have liked and why you think that might have been. So his hand shot up. 5 voices said, no, don't let him go first. And he looked as if somebody had taken his favorite toy away from him.
Oh, shame.
And I said, well, normally I would say for you to go first. I said, but I kind of get the impression you might want to hear what your colleagues have to say. So he started like this. Do you know something, Janine? They were like proud parents.
Oh.
Each one of them had been in separate meetings with him, and not once had he displayed any of the behaviors he was well known for. He didn't interrupt people. He didn't tell people they didn't know what they were doing. He didn't say, oh, this isn't going to work because we've tried it before. And I'm not joking, he was almost in tears with the feedback.
Beautiful.
And I
What,
said, you should be so proud of yourself.
oh, what do you feel switched for him from in your experience? What switched for him? Because I can just feel the flip of the energy. What do you feel looking back at it was the switch in his energy?
I think first and foremost, he challenged me.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he expected me to behave in the way that everybody else did when he challenged them. So I think there was a bit of a shock element in as much as, oh, okay, so I've challenged her and she's not backing down. So that, it almost against his will, I think, created curiosity. And when I threw the gauntlet down and said, that is, unless you're not up for the challenge, he knew he had to stay. And I think when he started getting involved in the exercises that I had got them to do, he started to feel different because it was very inclusive and his voice mattered. And I think that one of the things that I'm very, very passionate about is assertiveness, as you know, because I'm a great believer that everybody deserves to find their voice and speak their truth so that they can step into their power.
Mm-hmm.
And I think from some of the asides that him and I had during that workshop, there had been situations in his past where he wasn't able to find his voice.
Yeah.
And I think other times where perhaps he had spoken his truth, but he just didn't have the tools to do it in a way that other people could actually hear him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And take it on board. So I think there was a lot of frustration had been simmering for him for a very long time. And that hour helped him look at the fact that he could have a voice, he could be listened to. And there were people who could challenge him in a way that didn't make him look stupid.
Now, that is a good point. Yes.
Yeah.
You've brought up so many points of discussion there, feeling unseen, feeling unheard, feeling like their bruises were bumped against. And
Yeah.
the redirection you gave him through being assertive rather than aggressive was very powerful. If you had to look at the structure, A, of words, and B, of a confident conversation, that could be difficult, could be demeaning, and it could actually come from a very defensive space, what would that structure be?
Well, one of the things that I think people get stuck and get into difficult conversations is they don't actually plan ahead and ask themselves, what outcome do I want from having this conversation?
Mm-hmm.
Just sort of find ourselves in conversations. And as I say to people, you know, if you're going on holiday, you plan.
Mm-hmm.
You plan your destination. You plan the kind of things that you want to do when you get there so that you can actually look forward to it. And yet, when we have these conversations, we don't have a plan. And
Yep.
as I say, if you don't know what outcome you want to achieve, how are you going to know when you get there? So I think that's one thing, being able to have a plan. The other thing is to look at what's being said and ask ourselves, what is it I'm making this mean? Because what we make it mean is not always what the other person's intention is.
Yeah.
And of course, I'm a great believer in owning what it is that you have to say. Because people are very good at saying, you make me feel. But as I always say to them, when you point the finger out there, there's three others pointing back here, and they're called me, myself, and I. So we need to look inwards before we even open our mouths. And one of the other things is, well, there's lots of other things, as you know, but it's about being able to say things like, when I hear you say, or when I see you do, this is how it impacts me. Because as I said earlier, you know, you say to people, you make me feel. Well, no, they don't. We choose how we feel in any given situation. And when we take ownership and say, I feel,
Mm-hmm.
followed by an emotion, because so many people say, I feel that you,
Yes.
well, that's just a statement. It's not owning your feelings at all.
And it's also pushing back into the person.
Indeed. And I'm a great believer when we're about to embark on what we think will be a difficult conversation, we need to be aware of the conversation that's going on in here, because that's what impacts the energy that we show up with. And as you know, our energy walks in the door way before we do.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
Way before we do.
Mm-hmm. And energetically, people feel us in their heart and in their head before they hear us in their ears.
Very true. And if we go in there being defensive and feeling combative, then guess what we'll meet?
Mm-hmm.
Defensiveness and combativeness.
Because life's going to mirror. It's our emotions and frequency we're working in mirrors back to us. Something I often say to people is rage on the page before you go on in the meeting. Burn it and get into 10 things you're grateful for before you even open the conversation.
I love that.
Have
Even
you
Page, that is so cool.
rage on the page? Yeah, and then come back and give gratitude. Because honestly, it shifts that energy. So you can have that. Because I've been in many difficult conversations where I've gone, what happened there? And it turns out I was actually expressing back to that person their bruise for them to go and deal with. And then I take what they said to me and I'd go and deal with my bruise. What is, I know we use slightly different terminology. What do you suggest to people around that feeling of being triggered? Because I know for myself, I say to them, where can you turn the trigger into treasure? Because there's a wound or a bruise there, otherwise you'd be unable to respond to it. What is your take on that? And in what way do you help people through that? I mean, you've given some perfect examples already. Let's take it a bit further.
One of the things that shows up a lot is, especially when I'm working with senior managers, because everybody thinks that because they have a title, they've got it all sussed. I'm coaching the person, not the title.
Yes.
And a lot of the times they'll tell me about the situation in their team. People are they're not delivering, they're showing up, but they're not actually doing the work that's expected. And quite often they'll get quite angsty about it. And I'll say to them, so is that the 4-year-old or the 13-year-old talking to me? And I usually met with, I don't know what you're on about. I said, well, our 3-year-old can tend to get really quite scared and will sort of shut down. And the 13-year-old, or the 3-year-old or the 4-year-old, the 13-year-old will get quite combative, Well, that's mine. You're not having it. I thought you were my friend and now you're attacking me. And when I actually say to them, and they actually get it when we talk about the younger selves. And I say, I'm just wondering which younger self is being triggered for you. What's going on for them? And because we're not saying about them, the adult, they're able to sort of act as an observer. And it's amazing what comes out. Because the wounded child, hurts that were never acknowledged or addressed. And I use a lot of guided visualization with my clients and help them go back to that younger self as the adult and give that younger self tools that they would have needed then. And then, of course, that younger self can bring them back to the adult.
Yeah.
And I have seen some incredible transformations. People looking 10 years younger because that younger self has actually had their trauma, or it's not always trauma, but it's always some kind of hurt, acknowledged and validated. Because ultimately, that's all that we human beings want, is to be validated, have our experiences validated. But, you know, we have to go back and validate ourselves.
Mhm.
We can't rely on other people to do that.
Yes. We also get to acknowledge that there is a splinter there and take it out. That's when I do inner child work, it's actually the person is amazed because they were so often absolutely unaware. And this is what I'm hearing from you, that you've also experienced that people are absolutely unaware that there is a splinter there and that it's been festering for years. And that aggression or martyr victim energy is there to like try and protect the splinter that they're unaware of. I think Michael Singer puts it perfectly. He describes how people protect that splinter. Gail, we are coming to the end of our time together. What would you like to share? Well, for today, we're going to have many more conversations. What would you like to leave our audience with around acknowledging that bruising and difficult conversations, the wounding and difficult conversations, better ways of dealing with it, actually?
Yeah. What I would suggest for your listeners is to ask themselves, what do I want to bring about from this conversation? Do I want to be acknowledged? Do I want to hear the other person's perspective? Do I want them to hear mine? Do I want resolution or what have you? Because that is at the core of why people have to have difficult conversations. If they ask themselves, you know, I do a visualization with teams and I get them to look at, imagine a difficult conversation that you've had in the past and feel into the energy of that and actually experience it, but only as much as you're able to. And get them to write it down, all the feelings that came up for them. And then get them to shake that off and then say, okay, so now we're going to go into this conversation. You have a plan. You know what outcome it is that you want to have. This is not going to be a difficult conversation. This is going to be a learning conversation where each party will learn from the other. And I get them to go into the energy of what that feels like. And then when I bring them out, I say to them, so ultimately, you have a choice.
Mm-hmm.
You can decide that you're going to go into a conversation and it's going to be a difficult one because we're always right. Or you can go into a conversation and see it as a learning experience.
Mm-hmm.
Ultimately, the choice is yours. I think that is what I would urge everybody to think about. We have a choice. We can choose to go in there combative and take that combative energy into the conversation, or we can choose to go in with compassion, with kindness, with respect, not necessarily expecting the other person to share the same views, but respecting each other to have different views and being open to hearing them, because only then will we find a way forward together. Yeah, that's my.
That's beautiful, creating win-win situations. Gail, this has been such a privilege to have you. Thank you for joining us. Where can our audience find you?
Probably best on LinkedIn.
Okay.
I think you've got the link.
I will put it, yes, I shall put it in the show notes. People, even if it's just to have a conversation with Gail, reach out, explore what she offers you on LinkedIn. There's some awesome stuff there. Gail, thank you again. People, we'll see you soon. Bye bye.
Bye.